Welcome to the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel for another Game Week 11 preview. Today, I'm joined by the big man, Bakar, to answer some general questions, I would say, Bakar, for Game Week 11. For you personally, a little bit of a transitional week. We were just talking off camera. We'll bring your team up and we can talk about it, and especially how you did last week off the back of Wildcard 10. But going into Game Week 11, it's a pretty simple week for you, right?
Yeah, hello, Jack. Hello, and welcome to all the listeners and viewers. Yeah, I mean, very often you get the case when once you wildcard, you tend to have a long-term team. So the more often than not, the plan is to roll the transfer in the next week, which is exactly the case over here. I wildcarded in 10, so it's going to be a slow week for me and for most FPL managers actually, because even those who wildcard in 8, I assume most of them have made 2 transfers or 3 transfers in Game Week 10 and are looking probably to save in Game Week 11. So it's a bit of a transition week for a lot of FPL managers, but still, there's still a few things that need addressing. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Oh, a few things that need addressing in your team. Interesting, very interesting. First of all, let's talk about the wild card. Are you happy with it? You got a little bit of jam there as I go down to your bench. Gabriel didn't play.
It's a lot of jam.
You got Charlie Taylor's first goal in about 25 decades. Congratulations there.
It's a lot of jam. I mean, the shot had less than 0.01 XG.
It's a great strike, so
it's a lot of jam.
Say. It's a good goal.
And you know, it happens when you wildcard. You're putting so much time and effort and thought into the wildcard team that very often you don't look at the bench. In fact, I was very torn between Bowen, Mitoma, Palmer, Adingra. These combinations were sort of messing with my head right till the very last minute, and I wasn't really sure about these two players in my team in particular. And 1 minute before the deadline, I changed Bowen and Adingra to Mitoma and Palmer. And
wow, okay.
I looked at my team, and I had this decision between Taylor and Gehi, and I was like, it's not going to matter. Let's just play the guy with the easiest fixture and put him first as sub. And he was first on the bench, and luckily enough, he came through for me.
Fair play. Wow, so going down to the wire between those 2 budget midfield spots. Any regrets there? I mean, obviously that those points would have been the same, but any regrets in terms of missing out on a couple of midfielders, or are you happy with Palmer and Mitoma going forward? I
mean, Bowen and Adingra didn't really do much either, exactly. So it's fine. My reasoning behind picking Mitoma over Bowen was because I wanted that extra 1 million in the bank, which I thought could be useful in the weeks to come. Especially because I plan to roll this week, and with 2 free transfers and over 1 million in the bank, it gives me plenty of flexibility heading into Game Week 12 with whatever transfers I can make. With Bowen, I would have been sort of forced into keeping him over the long run. With Mitoma, I do have the flexibility of sort of jumping onto Mboma if need be at some point as well, and that is something I want to touch upon because I did consider him in my wildcard drafts. I had him in a few of my wildcard drafts, but in each of the drafts he was benched. So I don't really have any regrets regarding this spot, because even if I had picked Mboma, he would have been on the bench. So, I mean, even now I can just simply jump to him after Mitoma plays Sheffield United. There's always that opportunity in Game Week 14 when Mboma plays Luton Town.
Yeah, fair enough. And to be fair, I don't think I could ever say that it's a bad thing to, if you're not sure about a combination of players, to pick the cheapest one. You've got 1.1 million in the bank that, as you just explained, you wouldn't have had if you'd gone for the likes of Bowen instead of a Mitoma. So yeah, from my perspective, it looks pretty good. Your team kind of does itself this week. The one thing I do want to ask you though is who your third defender is going to be. I asked this with Abdul in yesterday's video as well. It's very interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I believe you'll be starting Gay. However, according to Fantasy Football Hub's predicted points, Charlie Taylor is predicted to score more points. It's only marginal, but he is predicted to score more points than Gay and Gabriel. Why do you think that is? And are you going to start Taylor?
I'm actually fairly certain Gehi.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I picked Gehi in the first place is because he covers Gabriel this week when Gabriel is playing Newcastle away. I mean, I expect that to be a game in which both teams score. So I don't really want to play my Arsenal defender in that fixture. And I mean, I don't really want to rely on the Burnley defense either, to be totally honest. Crystal Palace have a solid defense, and Burnley are in the bottom 3 attacks for XG and non-pen XG as well. So in my opinion, I'm fairly certain Gehi, and I think he will serve a purpose for me in the weeks to come. I think I'll be playing him in fact for the next 5 game weeks.
Yeah, wow. Well, there you go. I mean, that's the beauty of having a deeper bench on wildcard, is that you can implement some form of rotation there. Before we move on to some more general questions, Bakar and I thought we'd open this up and ask some more pertinent questions for other viewers, for the rest of you guys watching, just because for Bakar's team it is quite straightforward this week. Just a couple of decisions. Turner versus Areola is one of them. What are you thinking there?
Personally, I'm not really sure that Turner even starts after the howler he made against Salah last week. But I mean, irrespective, I think Areola probably just for the saves. I'm pretty sure Brentford will score, and same with Villa. Villa have an elite attack. I think they're first for XG this season, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just gonna play Areola for saves. Sure. And hopefully, because it gives me the false hope that he might end up saving an Mboma penalty.
It's funny. I mean, Abdul said the exact same thing on yesterday's video, so that is very funny. And then one more word on Palmer. So I think you're going to be playing him this week, but as you spoke about on wildcard 10, you have a rotation policy in mind for the fixtures after that, where I presume Gabriel will come back into the team, but Gay would remain. So you'd be going to a 4-4-2, right? Wait, let me start by saying he was excellent in the previous game, and you were very unlucky.
Yeah, I mean that's what really pissed me off, because he had created 4 chances, 1 big chance, XG of 0.7. So his numbers were great. He should have had 1 return at the very least.
Yeah.
I do realize that this is the weak link in my team, and it will be a weak link in my team week in, week out, which is why I've left that 1 million in the bank, because should an option emerge, let's say if I want to jump on someone like a Gordon next week, because Newcastle are playing Bournemouth next week, and let's say if there's this option of Nketiah, let's say Jesus remains out, right? So I can jump from Archer to Nketiah as well. So I realized the fact that I don't want to commit to having Palmer as a perma play in my team long term, which is why I've sort of given myself this flexibility of deciding where I end up on him after another game week. I'm happy to play him this week because his underlying data is good, but it's really after this week where I'm concerned, because next week he has City at home and then he's playing Newcastle away. Now, those are 2 of the best defenses in the league. I can take a fixture against Spurs where I do think Chelsea will score in that game, and I have no problem playing him, especially if he's on penalties. So yes, it's basically a wait and see situation for me, and I'm just gonna monitor him this week before deciding what to do with him next week.
Yeah, well, that makes sense to me. I mean, we all know the fixture run from kind of 14 really is very good. Yeah, so those next 3 that were always going to be a little bit of an issue. But yeah, you have rotation options, so let's see what you end up doing. One final question: captaincy. Is it even a debate this week? Because Salah's been consistently good all season. The only game that he's blanked in, he actually had an assist in that game that was incorrectly ruled out, as we all know. But
no, it is a debate.
Who are you going to captain?
I mean, it is a debate. I don't really see it as a no-brainer. But for me, the rule is simple for me. I mean, whenever Haaland has a fixture at home against any of the other 14 apart from the big 6,
yeah, I completely agree.
And assuming that it's not a double game week for anyone else, then I simply choose to go with Haaland. It's more often than not been the case with me, and I just look at his data at home. It's too good for me to go against. I mean, his ownership is frighteningly high. I don't really want to risk myself for a fixture at home to Bournemouth. This is one of the fixtures which I had kept him for, because there was this discussion in Game Week 8, and keep or sell Haaland, and a few FPL managers, content creators, that chose to sell him. But I actually wanted him for this fixture alone, and I do think his whole potential is very, very high.
That's the problem. If you were ever going to sell him, it was fixtures like these that I think the upside is so high. However, non-owners did get away with the previous home fixture. That was in Game Week 9 that was relatively easier on paper. So we'll see what happens. A lot of the time, City do seem to turn it on against the so-called bigger teams. But yeah, Bournemouth at home, 9.2 predicted points. That is quite emphatic as far as predicted points go on Fantasy Football Hub. Okay, mate, that's it for your team. So what we're going to do now, as I said, is we're going to open it up to some more general questions and debates. First of all, we need to talk about Tottenham players in general, I think, and where you stand on them. Now, obviously, you moved from 3 Tottenham players to just the 1 on your wildcard. People that weren't on wildcard, or perhaps wildcarded in Game Week 8 and kept 3 and still have 3. Is that too much exposure? Should people be looking at Madison out or a Porro or a Doggy out now that the fixtures have kind of turned? I think Son is one that we can all agree is pretty nailed on, especially if he keeps playing in that number 9 role. But for the other 2 slots, should we be moving them on?
I think the defense is more of a priority to sell, if I'm being honest, because when you look at their fixtures, Chelsea, Wolves away, Villa, City in the next 4, I don't see any clean sheet for Spurs in the next 4. I'd be surprised if they kept one. So if you have a defender, I think they're better defenders to move to. Madison, I don't think is a hard sell. I think he is fine to keep, and he will keep taking over. His underlying data is fine. It's not as if his data is poor, so you have to sell him. Even in these fixtures, we've seen that Spurs are a ridiculously attacking side. So while Chelsea, Wolves, Villa, City is a bad run of fixtures from a defensive point of view, I mean, the next 3 especially are fine from an attacking point of view. So I don't really mind keeping Madison if I had to. Having said that, I think a lot of people are in this position where they're choosing between Madison and Saka, and I do prefer Saka after this game week, but Saka, because Saka has Newcastle away this week, which is obviously a tough fixture. Newcastle are one of the best defenses in the league. Their underlying data is very strong, and Saka generally away from home is not as explosive. So I think this is a week where you can afford to keep Madison and then maybe reassess the situation next week. And next week, I think I would prefer jumping on Saka.
Yeah, fair enough. So a question about if you are going to be selling a Tottenham defender, then obviously you said there that the fixtures from a defensive point of view are worse than they have been for sure. I'm kind of struggling to see where you would go for a similarly priced defender. Could you rank the defense? I mean, you have 2 options in your team that are very popular at the moment, the likes of Tsimikas and Cash. But outside of that, maybe a word on Gabriel as well here. Like, is he nailed on? Just who would you go for if you have someone like a Udogie or a Porro perhaps, or even like a Botman that we know now is going to be out for a long time? Who are you transferring in for them?
I think it might be slightly late now for Cash if you don't have him. I think his fixtures are turning after 2 weeks, and I mean, to be very honest, I've sort of mentally prepared myself to sell him in 2 weeks as well. So I think you'd be better placed if you ignore the Villa defense at this point. Okay. I do think that there's plenty of potential for Tsimikas and Gabriel though. And if you don't own either of these, I mean, not necessarily for the Newcastle fixture, but let's say from next week onwards, you can buy Gabriel, or if you don't own Tsimikas, then this is the perfect week to bring him in, the Luton fixture. I don't really have concerns with Gabriel over his game time because Arteta did mention that those players who had accumulated a lot of minutes in the break were given a rest. He was referring to Odegaard, but Gabriel had actually played more minutes than Odegaard, so he falls into that category as well. So I fully expect him to play in the weeks to come. But the good thing is that you don't have to jump on him this week, so you can basically reassess this week and then jump on Gabriel next week. While for Tsimikas, if you don't own him, I think he's a great buy because he's just 4.6 million, cheapest chips, great fixtures, and the fact that he's taking a share of the set pieces as well means that he's going to get bonus points as well. If I had to guess, because there are not too many defenders with high upside in the weeks to come. I mean, Cash is one, but I think Tsimikas is the only one who comes close to Cash in terms of upside for the next 2 weeks. I think that Tsimikas is an excellent buy.
Funnily enough, he's actually top of all defenders on Fantasy Football Hub's predicted points, even ahead of Trent Alexander-Arnold, which is kind of unbelievable. But if you look at the stats and the underlying stats this season, and based on what you just mentioned, now that he's playing full 90 as well, which was important because we obviously had some concerns over minutes there and possible rotation. Yeah, he's predicted to score, obviously it's close, but predicted to score the most points out of any defender across the next 4 game weeks. Pretty insane, but would you be surprised if it happened? I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked either, because just the fact that he has so many avenues to points, clean sheets, corners. When you're taking corners, you create chances, and that leads to a very quick accumulation of bonus points. So there's just too many routes to points.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's talk about budget midfielders. Now, you already mentioned the fact that you're not entirely sure on Palmer going forward. Looking at perhaps a Gordon or someone else. If you have the likes of, well, more pressing issues, for example, Neto now, who's obviously picked up that hamstring injury, or James Ward-Prowse, who's playing deeper than we thought, doesn't look as good of an FPL option as we might have thought a few game weeks ago. Where do you go right now? If you can't get up to sort of an Mbermo at that 6.5 or getting close to 7 million now price, so let's say sub 6 million, where are you going?
The options are very slim.
That's the problem. Like, because I like the price point's all right as an idea, but there are just so few options there, really.
I mean, there's Wang Hee-chan from Wolves who's sort of playing as a striker, and he sort of nailed down a starting position. But he is sort of overperforming his data. And Wolves, they can tick along, but they're not going to be this free-flowing side which is going to score a lot of goals. I think Wang is fine though, because if you're going this week, then Sheffield United, Fulham, even Spurs at home in the next three is fine. The fixtures are really good. So I mean, if I was picking one this week, I would probably go Wang, despite the fact that he's overperforming his data. The only reason why I won't have Palmer is because of the fact that obviously this is assuming that you don't have an option to rotate with him.
Yeah.
Because the next three aren't exactly ideal for Palmer: Spurs, Newcastle, and City. A Dingra could be an option, but his underlying data isn't as strong either. And I mean, with De Zerbi, you never know whether he's going to play him, or he might choose to rest him in any random fixture. But Adingra is fine as well. I don't really mind Adingra either. Everton, Sheffield United, and Forest. But the only concern here is the expected minutes. I'm not entirely sure about the expected minutes with Adingra.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about also like the positioning of Mitoma and Adingra in the last game? They changed their shape a little bit against Fulham.
Yeah,
they were in I mean, they were still high up the pitch, but it was more kind of a wing back role than an out and out kind of winger.
Yeah.
Concerns there with Mitoma as well?
De Zerbi tends to do these kind of things where he just goes different tactically depending on the opponent. And Fulham are a team which have troubled Brighton in the past, and they've been a bit of a bogey team. They haven't really won against them in recent meetings. So maybe it was to counter that. I'm not entirely concerned, because with De Zerbi, you never know. And even in that position, Mitoma did have an opportunity to sort of get an assist or even score himself. So while it's not ideal, I mean, I'm going to reassess, because I can't really make a decision based on 1 week's tactics or data.
Sure thing. Right, a couple more questions. Starting with a man that has been sensational this season. However, I want to hear your thoughts on whether or not managers that have him in their team should keep him. It's Trippier.
It's a good question. I mean, if you don't have anything pressing to do in your team, you can just keep him. But the way I would look at Trippier is, because I see very little teams who would want to keep Trippier in the weeks to come, because obviously they'd like to sort of jump on the pricier midfield assets or the pricier forward assets. I mean, a lot of people will be looking to bring in, for example, Saka, right? So I assume that because people are keeping Son, keeping Salah, Haaland, Trippier would be the make weight. So I think if you're selling Trippier eventually, then you can sell him this week. But if you want to keep him for the long run, then he's fine keeping. But for example, if you're gonna sell Trippier for someone like a Tsimikas next week, then why not do it this week when Trippier has Arsenal and Tsimikas has Luton Town at home? So people need to look at the bigger picture and whether they want to keep Trippier in the weeks to come. I don't think many FPL managers would have that luxury. And if they don't, then I think he's an easy sell.
Oh, an easy sell. The one of the most high scoring players this season. An easy sell. What is it? Is it just the fixtures then that's the main thing? Obviously with clean sheets, it makes sense.
I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great pick, but when you have, because let's talk about the popular FPL assets, right? Haaland is going over, Salah is going over, Son is going over. Watkins is going to stay for the next 2 to 4 weeks at least as well, because he is Forest, Fulham, Bournemouth in 3 of the next 4 weeks. So I assume no one will be selling him either. Saka has Burnley at home next week. And then he has Luton to come in the weeks to come as well, followed by Wolves at home. So in the pecking order, would you rather have Trippier or would you rather have Saka?
Oh, not even up for debate. Of course, Saka.
Precisely. So even though Trippier is a good option, something has to give. And if someone is to be the make-weight, then it has to be him. And
to be fair, I would say vindication for you on Gameweek 10. Not sticking with him. I think you've timed that. I mean, Gameweek 10 wildcarders that sold Trippier or got rid of him on that wildcard. I think you timed it perfectly. I got burned a little bit by going without him on Gameweek 8. Obviously, that was, I felt like I had to do that for this upcoming run, but it would have been better to keep him for a couple of weeks, as Bakar did. Now, final question, my friend, is about Erling Haaland. You just mentioned that he is integral now this week. He's going to be your captain, most likely. He's not going anywhere from your team. What about managers that don't have him? We spoke about this a little bit earlier in the video. But for those that perhaps were on a Game Week 8 wildcard and saw the value in not going for him, or just thought, you know what, I can spread this money around, off the back of that haul against United, now with that plum fixture against Bournemouth, do they have to bite the bullet and just say he's Erling Haaland, he needs to come back in? Or do you stick with the strategy and captain someone else?
I think those who went without Haaland in Game Week 8 have been rewarded fairly well. They've had Darwin, they've had Watkins so far. Even last week, it wasn't a disaster because even though Haaland scored 16 points, Darwin got 10, was it?
Yep.
And it wasn't as if Haaland was highly captained either. If I was in this position, I would just stick to the strategy, and the strategy would be to captain Salah for the weeks to come, because that's the assumption they've taken when they've wildcarded in Game Week 8 and sold Haaland. Because when you look at Salah's fixtures, Luton at home, Luton away this week is fine. Brentford at home in Game Week 12 is fine, and Game Week 13 they can captain someone like a Saka maybe, or Son as well at home.
Yeah.
And then Game Week 14 and 15, Fulham and Sheffield are the fixtures for Liverpool. So there's no real need to jump on Haaland as such before Game Week 16 when City play Luton. And I assume that would be the plan. So I don't think that one game week should be enough to sort of panic into buying Haaland back in. If you've made a well thought out plan and you've had other players in place for those fixtures, I assume people have Darwin in that position, and they've spent the cash on defense and midfield. I don't think there's any pressing need to sort of throw that plan away in the bin and panic yourself into taking hits to buy Haaland in, because I think if that plan over the course of 7 to 8 weeks till Game Week 15 should still pay off, and it has been paying off handsomely.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the timing of the fixtures this week. City play in a 3 o'clock game on Saturday, and then if you're a Salah captain, you have to wait till Sunday 4:30 to see whether Salah can match Haaland. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But it's one of those where if Haaland does nothing somehow against Bournemouth, and you've got that 4:30 game, Luton away on Sunday as a Salah capper, wow, that could be simply glorious. Let's be honest. But yeah, it's one of those. I don't know. I'd really struggle with that. I'd have to be behind the sofa or just away from all technology and screens and data. But if I agree, I do agree with Bakar. Like you've kind of set your stall out now and you have gained from it. The likes of Darwin have really kind of proved their worth. What do you think about him? As my final question going forward. You've mentioned that the Watkins probably is a hold for, well, maybe not the next 4, maybe the next 2, but after that, is Darwin going to be an option, do you think? Is he nailed on in that team, or just are his stats so good when he plays that he's just a good pick?
He's first choice and he's a good pick. But
okay.
I won't be, because in my position, in my team, I have Watkins and I don't have any plans of selling Watkins for Darwin. The crucial thing with Darwin is that in Game Week 13, Liverpool have another early kickoff, which is away to Manchester City.
Yeah.
Neither is the fixture great. Neither do we know whether Darwin's going to play because he's been benched the previous 2 times. He's come back late from international duty. So as of now, I have no immediate plans to bring in Darwin till at least Game Week 14.
Sure. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Okay, my friend, I think that's everything. I think we've covered the majority of gripes this week from managers. Guys, if we haven't answered your particular question, get it in the comments. We'll have a look through and reply if there's one that seems solid that we may have missed out. Bakar, thank you very much as always.
Cheers,
my friend.
Thank you.
Good luck in the next game week. Good luck to all of you guys as well, watching and listening. And yeah, we will see you on the next one.